This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Once upon a time, there was a magical place where it never rained, and Shia Labeuof wrapped the plot of a movie. It's Holes, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to another episode of This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. This week's episode, we're talking about the 1997 literary classic Holes, 2003 film classic Holes. We have a co-host this week because both of us have read this book before and reread it again, and we needed, that non-book reader on our show this week. So we're introducing Miss April Etmanski from No Such Thing as a Bad Movie podcast. April, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so April, tell us a little bit about No Such Thing as a Bad Movie. If any of our viewers, listeners, I always say viewers, used to YouTube, don't know what your podcast is.
Well, it's me and my boyfriend Colin and our friend Justin, and we just talk about bad movies, basically, but we kind of talk about like what we liked about them, and we try and kind of make a case for all of these terrible movies that we watch, and, we kind of laugh about it, and kind of like very, very similar to Good, Bad, or Bad, Bad type of thing. Yeah,
so if any of our listeners, which we have a fair number that are... who are Good, Bad, or Bad fans who've come to this podcast. Crossover fans from that may already know of No Such Thing as a Bad Movie. We've talked about it on Good, Bad, or Bad. We've mentioned it on here before. Colin was on our Ryan's Babe episode in the intro,
That's
and
right.
we mentioned the podcast there. I love the show. I highly recommend. I just listened to your... It's not your most recent, but it's 2 episodes ago, I think. Tiptoes. You guys covered Tiptoes.
That's a crazy one.
It is a pretty bonkers movie, which we also did on Good, Bad, or Bad, Bad back in the day.
That's right. That's right.
So April's going to join us as our resident non-book reader in this instance. Not that you don't read books, but you just didn't read this one.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Also, we wanted to mention before we get started into our main segments that Katie and I were recently on Philosophers in Space, which is a podcast we both enjoy quite a bit. It's a philosophy podcast that talks about takes specific sci-fi stories, movies, books, TV shows, episodes of TV shows, and then relates them to a specific philosophy topic. It's hosted by Aaron Rabinowitz. I keep wanting to call him Aaron Rabbi, and Thomas Smith. It's a great podcast if you like sci-fi, if you like philosophy. We were on talking about...
We were talking about The Golden Man by Philip K. Dick.
Philip K. Dick, short story. We're also going to be on there. They do a similar like bad movie riffing thing that we're going to be on here in a couple weeks. We haven't recorded that yet, but we're going to be talking about next.
Yeah,
with the Nick Cage movie, which is loosely based on The Golden Man, which I've never seen. But
apparently it's very loosely.
Apparently it's very bad and very loosely based. But that episode comes out tomorrow of their podcast. Tomorrow, if you're listening to this, or today when you're listening to this, because this comes out on Wednesday.
Yes.
That episode comes out on Wednesday. So there you go. Check out Philosophers in Space. We're on that. And one final thing before we get started. So, as everybody knows who's a regular listener, before each segment, we play a little clip that somewhat relates to what the segment is. So for like Guess Who, we play a Princess Bride clip where Wesley or Inigo asks, "Who are you?" That sort of thing. We want to switch those up. We've been using the same ones for like 2 years now.
Yeah.
And I like them. They're all great. And if we don't get good suggestions, we'll just keep them. But we're reaching out to you, the fans. If you have suggestions that relate to the specific segments that are good movie quotes that we can pull and use, send them in. You can either email them to us at thisfilmislit@gmail.com or message on Facebook or Twitter, however you want to. Just send us like what the quote is, what movie, that sort of thing. And we'll do our best to be able to go find it. Ideally, if you can find like a YouTube video and send it, that's even better. Yeah. But if not, we'll go out and do our best to find them and pull them, and then maybe they'll take over as the segment clips. But again, if we don't get any good ones, we'll just keep using the same ones because I'm lazy.
We just keep rolling.
Yeah. All right. That is it. Let's get into the main meat and bones of the episode. Like I said, we're talking about holes. And our first segment is Guess Who. And if you're new to the show, what Guess Who is, it's a game show portion. Right, Katie?
Yes.
So what are we going to do here, Katie?
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
So what we're going to do on Guess Who, we are going to read some character descriptions from the book. And April, our lovely assistant, is going to try and guess which characters we're describing.
Since she has only seen the movie.
Yes.
She's going to base this purely on their movie-going experience.
So it's kind of a test of how accurate the filmmakers were to what's described in the book.
And how well the movie watcher was paying attention. No pressure.
That's right. Oh, okay.
All right. Katie, I'll go first with the first one here.
Okay.
Even though he was inside, he wore sunglasses and a cowboy hat. He had a tattoo of a rattlesnake on his arm, and as he signed his name, the snake's rattle seemed to wiggle.
That's a very good description, first off.
Yes.
I'm going to say John Voight's character. I'm sorry I don't know everyone's name.
No, that's
I've got
fine.
IMDb here.
It's all
right,
good.
Mr. Sir. That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
It's all
Pretty
good.
good
I
name.
never remember the characters' names. I just describe
Yeah, you
them.
give actors names so often.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if they're like a name actor.
Yeah.
But I think I remember like the rattlesnake sound when he was around. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go for him.
That is correct. Nailed it. 1 for 1. Yeah, that is Mr. Sir. He's not in the scene he's introduced. He's not wearing the sunglasses and hat, but he does wear them in other scenes outside. But he's not wearing them when he's first introduced, mainly because I think they want you to see that that's John Voight.
Probably.
Like, they want it to be obvious. Like, look, it's
Yeah.
John.
Look who we have in our movie, you guys.
It's John Voight.
And he has a ridiculous haircut.
Oh, very
looks-
ridiculous.
It's beautiful. I don't
Yes.
know what you guys are talking about.
It's something.
Katie, next one.
All right. The top of his head was shaved so close it was almost bald, but his face was covered in a thick, curly black beard. His nose was badly sunburned.
Okay, I'm going purely on the sunburn part. The other stuff doesn't really match. I'm guessing it's the guy that was in Buster Scruggs.
Yes.
Dr. something, I think his name was. He was like the guy who guarded the kids, and he always had like suntan lotion on his nose.
Yeah. Pendansky.
Pendansky.
Or Pendansky
Yeah.
is his name.
Pendansky.
They call him Mom a lot in the movie and the book, so that's like their nickname for him. Is
He's
Mom.
supposed to be like their counselor.
Yeah, but that is him, and he doesn't have a
right.
beard though. in
No,
the
he
movie.
doesn't.
No beard. But other than that,
And they
pretty
got the
spot on.
sunburn
The
right.
sunburn, yeah,
Maybe they were like, can't get anything else. We'll at least get the sunburn.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, next one. We have what do I think 6 here? Yeah. So 2 for 2 so far. She had dark skin, already narrows it down pretty significantly. Just the she. I could have stopped after she, and you're like, well, there's like 2 options.
Yeah.
I guess his mom is another one, yeah. She had dark skin and a very wide mouth. She had no left foot. Her legs stopped at her ankle.
Well, when I first read or heard like no left foot, I was
Yeah.
like, what? I
Yeah.
don't remember anyone that didn't have a foot, but I'm going to guess the old lady in the flashback.
Yes, that is Madame Zeroni, who is the fortune teller.
Yes.
That
But
Elia.
lays down a pretty sick curse
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
Yelnats family.
That curses the Yelnats family. And yeah, in the book, she has no left foot. I didn't notice. I think she has both of her feet, seemingly.
I don't know if they show it.
They show a shot of her sitting in her chair, but I can't recall now if she has both feet or not.
I mean, they never show her standing.
True.
So
So she,
Yeah.
it's hard to tell.
I don't recall seeing her bottom half.
Yeah.
Like at all.
They may have just skipped over that.
Yeah.
Like, nah. So, but yes, 3 for 3. Correct. Again, the female characters, there's not a ton in this one, so that made it a little bit easier. He had a long... Oh, wait. I did that one. You're next. Sorry, Katie. I'm just going right through.
he had a long, skinny neck and a big round head with wild, frizzy blonde hair that stuck out in all directions.
I'm going to go with Stanley.
Ooh. First
Yelnats?
one incorrect. This is a minor, well, somewhat minor, relatively minor character. But it is a pretty spot-on description translated to the movie.
Yes.
You probably just don't remember this character's name because he's not super important. But one of the fellow campers, Zigzag, who is the guy who Stanley gets into a fight with.
Yes.
He
did have crazy hair.
Yes.
And that is his big thing in the book, is that he has crazy hair. And a long neck, right? You said? Yeah, long skin.
He's like one of the only campers that gets a full-on description of what he looks like, which is interesting because he's not like pivotal.
No, he is the one that, like we said, Stanley gets into a fight with him, but he's not as important as like X-Ray.
Yeah.
Or who's kind of more of a main character.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. All right. So 3 for 4. Final 2 here. A tall woman with red hair stepped out. She wore a black cowboy hat and black cowboy boots that were studded with turquoise stones. The sleeves on her shirt were rolled up and her arms were covered with freckles, as was her face.
Well, if this matches the character in the movie, I'd have to go with Sigourney Weaver. It sounds like her, who is the warden.
Yes. She is the warden. I think we find out her name eventually, if I remember correctly. But for most of the movie and the book, she's just known as the warden.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one translated pretty perfect, other than the wardrobe. She's not wearing black cowboy boots.
Yeah, it's not exact.
Stones. But she is wearing cowboy boots.
Yeah, it's pretty close. I feel like they got the spirit of it.
Yeah, and she's got the red hair and freckles and all that sort of stuff. So very similar, but yeah. Because to me, the black cowboy boots with turquoise stone studs is like very distinctive, and they didn't. It seems strange to not do that exact thing. I guess there was a reason, but because they just kind of like generic cowboy boots, but whatever. So 4 for 5. 4 for 5. 4 for 5. Last one.
Okay.
She appeared to be Hispanic with straight black hair and dark eyes.
There's so few women in this story, like, because that could be Patricia Arquette's character. But I think it's a more big deal that she's supposed to be a white woman in the book. So I'm gonna guess that this is the girl that the great grandfather was trying to marry. Maybe the pig stealer.
Yes,
that
I don't
woman?
remember her name.
It was it was something with an M. It was like Moira or something like that.
Because they're in Latvia. But no, unfortunately, I think she is also blonde in the book, if I remember correctly, which she is in the movie. This is actually the lawyer that comes to save Stanley. Yes.
Well, yeah. I don't know how I could have got that one.
No, that was a bit tougher.
I don't think they tell us her name in the movie. I don't recall that we learned her name in the movie.
They say...
I don't think so.
They might say her first name, but they don't say her last name, which she is Miss Marengo.
Ms. Marengo in the book.
And she has straight hair, which the actress playing... Which I've seen that actress in something else, and it was bugging me. Who plays the lawyer? I can't remember what I knew her from.
She's in a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I think she just has smaller roles in a lot of stuff. Maybe. Like a lot of TV shows. But she has like curly hair.
Yeah, it's
like,
curly
it's
in
not
the movie.
Straight. So her character felt very different to me in the book. And I actually think I have it in the later segment than she is portrayed in the movie, which I thought was interesting. But 4 for 6, not too bad. You know, it's a passing grade. So
good. Nice.
All right, we're gonna move on to our next segment, which was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
Was That in the Book is a segment where April, who obviously, as we mentioned before, did not read the book, is going to ask us some questions. Because a lot of times when you're watching a movie, you're like, was that, you're watching something that's an adaptation, you might wonder yourself, like, that seems like that was probably just added for the movie, or vice versa. And so April's going to ask us some questions about what things she saw as she was watching the film that made her wonder, was that in the book? And we got the answers. So, April, what's your first question?
Okay, first one was John Voight's character, Mr. Sir. He's kind of introduced as eating sunflower seeds because he's like, I just quit smoking. And I thought maybe that seemed like something how like studio was like, I don't want a character smoking. How about he eats sunflower seeds?
Interesting. Yeah. I like that explanation of why you ask that question, because I can definitely see that. that, especially because
it's like a kid's movie.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, we don't want a character who smokes.
Especially if you weren't sure when the book was written, like, because and it was like the mid 90s, which by then it was kind of phasing out the smoking. But if you weren't sure, I could see that for sure. But no, that is a very specific character thing that Jon Voight does in the book. He has quit smoking, and he is chewing sunflower seeds. And when he is introduced, he has a giant sack of them in his office or whatever that he chews. And I think it's also one of those little character things that they use throughout the book and the movie to just make him a little more off-putting. Yeah. Because he's always like chewing them and like spitting them. And, it's like spitting. Yeah. He's just,
like chewing and spitting out sunflower seeds is probably like the grossest thing you can do, second to like chewing tobacco. It's just like, ugh. So I get it. It worked.
I don't mind some sunflower seeds if I'm out playing baseball, but if I'm in a setting other than that, I am nothing to do with sunflower seeds.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not going to be chewing on them when I'm in my office. That's a weird, very strange thing to me. All right, second question. What do you got?
Well, I was very surprised with all of the gun violence in the movie, which kind of goes back to my last question, which was like, I thought this was a kid's movie, and there's people are pointing guns and shooting guns, and there's death by guns, and I was just very surprised at the adult content, specifically with this, but I was also not sure, like you said, when it was written, or people maybe it was 2003. I think this came out.
This is with the film, yeah.
Well, Mr. Sir does have a gun.
Yeah.
And he fires it once to kill a lizard, which we also see him do in the movie.
Yeah.
Although I think he might do that more than once in the movie. I can't remember.
I think he just does it. He shoots at another one later, but misses, or I don't remember.
And in the book, he fires it once in the air to break up a fight.
Yeah. But that's it. Like, he doesn't use it other than that. But there is a fair amount of gun violence in the flashbacks. We get told about Kate. We see it in the movie. We don't really see it necessarily. I think it's more just like described that she was this outlaw, and we assume I think maybe one of the heists or something is mentioned. I can't recall in the book. But the gun violence where Sam is killed, and in their story specifically, is straight from the book. So there is quite a bit, and I think I would probably classify the book as more bordering on young adult, or is there a category that you would describe this as, Katie?
I would describe it as kind of like riding that line.
Isn't there a name for that, like before young adult, but not children's lit?
Middle grade.
Middle grade,
we could call it. I think it hedges maybe a little more towards young adult.
Yeah.
I read it in like the 5th grade.
Yeah, I think
so
I
was
probably
like
read
11
it in
or
5th
12.
or 6th grade. Yeah.
Is there armed guards in the prison?
There's just the one. There's not armed guards, and we'll talk about this scene later where Mr. Sir kind of explains the security. But he is the only one that we know of in the book that has a gun. Is Mr. Sir? He has his pistol that he carries around, and there are no armed guards though. Because, as Mr. Sir explains, we're in the middle of the desert. There's nowhere to go. You can run, but
they've got the only water for like miles and miles.
Yeah, so they don't have armed guards. They just have the one gun, and he specifically says it's just for lizards or whatever. So
that makes a little more sense.
Yep.
Having people with machine guns in like this juvenile detention center, where it's like, what are they, like murderers? Like all of that, they are all just guilty of like small petty
usually
crimes.
Usually like small
anyway.
crimes and like stealing things. Yeah. All right, next question. What do you got?
Does Armpit, which is one of the kids, do a random funky dance to a record scratching song?
No, there is no dance scene in the book. I think that scene explicitly. It's funny that you mentioned it. Felt so explicitly to me like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like that was they edited the movie, and then they're like, we need a scene because Katie, you mentioned this later, how mean all the kids are all the time. And then so when we get to the end of the movie and they're kind of all friends and like friendly, I think they we need at least a couple more scenes where it seems like they get along. So they maybe went back and added this scene of them dancing together and like having fun, because it kind of comes out of nowhere and then it's like not relevant to anything. And I'm feeling like maybe that's what it was. They were like, so they got some note that was like, well, wait, are they all friends? I thought they all hated each other, because like most of the movie they're kind of like mean to each other a lot and stuff like that. and which is a little bit different in the book, and we'll talk about sort of the dynamic of the relationships between the kids. But that scene is not in the book. There is no dancing. They don't have a dance off.
Not that we see.
Not that we see. They could, but it is not mentioned in the book.
Oh, too bad.
All right.
Next question. Was the warden, Sigourney Weaver, a woman in the book? No, I think we already know that she was. Because we already talked about that.
I forgot about that.
Well, I thought that because it's like a traditional male character, and I was like, what if it was like Alien and the character was actually written to be a man, and they were just like, hey, Sigourney Weaver could, rock this, so let's get her in there. Because I mean, what you see a lot in movies is characters are like female, like for like a specific reason, because it's like, oh, they're a love interest, or they do like some kind of like traditional female role. Yeah. And then I thought, oh, is she going to be like somebody's like daughter? But kind of, but not really.
Yeah. She ultimately is kind of, I mean, she's a descendant, but she could also have been, it doesn't matter. Like, it's irrelevant to her specific character, other than, I guess, arguably it's kind of irrelevant to her specific character, and I think that's an interesting call to see, like, when you're just watching the movie going, I could see this going either way. I think the movie or the book specifically, because the movie specifically plays on and the book specifically plays on our expectations of it being a man. It's mentioned both in the book and the movie that Stanley assumes that the warden is Mr. Sir at first, and then also assumes even after that he still assumes that it's a man. And then it ends up not being, and it's kind of subversive in that way. Yeah.
And the movie teases it a little by showing just her feet first. Yeah. And it's kind of like an androgynous shot.
Cowboy boots, and jeans, you don't know. And then
it like pans up.
Yeah. And it's also really interesting because I believe I read that Sigourney Weaver is top billed in this movie, which would make sense. And she doesn't show up until 40 minutes into the film, when she first makes an appearance. So... but yeah, it was always a woman. It was always when I remember when I saw this movie made, or when I saw this movie as being made as a kid, and then I found out they cast Sigourney Weaver as the warden. I was like, yeah, that makes even like at 13, I was like, yeah, that makes sense, or however old I was at the time.
The attempted lynching of Sam resulting in his being shot. Did that go down that way in the book?
Yes. And it is even more brutal in the book, we think.
Yeah, I think I would say it's arguably more brutal even. I mean, and it is in the movie. Like, they don't pull a lot of punches with the scene. But
yeah, it's not, like, watered down, really.
No, it is the same type of thing where they see, the villagers see Sam and Kate kissing. And then they form a lynch mob, basically.
And they burn the school.
Down, and all that stuff happens. And then... And the only real difference is that in the book, Kate and Sam go to run away together.
Yeah, so
she goes to find him, and she's in the boat with him as they're rowing away. And then Trout catches up because he has a motor boat or whatever. And then the thing that makes it more brutal to me is that so the way it plays out in the book is we're watching from the shore from Kate's perspective, and then we see. Or in the movie.
In the movie, we're
watching from the shore from Kate's perspective, and we just kind of see the silhouette and hear a gunshot, and then he falls. In the book, it's described as the boat capsizes. Trout Walker, who's the guy chasing them, his boat capsizes their boat, and they fall in the water. And while Sam's swimming, they just shoot him dead in the water, which to me feels like more... Even, I don't know, it just feels more cruel. And Kate's like right there with him. Which is, again... And
they basically, like, pull her out kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
And then when they get back to shore, she sees that they shot the donkey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a brutal scene for this type of age range of a book. And again, they didn't pull a lot of punches in the movie, but it's slightly... Again, since we're watching from the shore and all that, it feels a little more
we're slightly
sanitized.
Removed from it in the movie more so than we are in the book. Although the book, I will say, the way that it's written, it's not
it doesn't
it's not particularly like
it doesn't dwell on the
it doesn't dwell on it.
Yeah.
Some of those kind of harder scenes, the book, the style of the writing approaches it in a kind of clinical manner where the narrator will be like, okay, here's what happened.
Right.
I'm not pulling any punches, but I'm also not describing it in lurid
It's not
detail.
the gory details. It's just, and it literally says, I think, the narrator, or quote unquote, even says something along the lines of what you said of like, and then what happened was they got her, they shot him, boom, boom, moving on. And it kind of leaves it to your imagination, which I think also makes it worse.
It's so much worse.
At least, it's pretty rough. But yeah, that is in the book. That was a long answer. Sorry. Detailed answer.
Okay. Did the warden have snake venom nail polish in an old brass case?
Yes. One detail was changed. It was a flowered case in the book. But she does have the same rattlesnake venom nail polish, which I can't imagine
actually
what that would do to the color.
Yeah,
I don't know.
She says
how
it helps the color,
works,
but I don't understand how that
I don't
would be a thing. But maybe, who knows? I am not a whatever the person who makes makeup is.
A nail technician.
Nail technician, specifically. Yeah,
it's a very feminine like weapon. Like, I'm gonna scratch you with my poison nail polish. But points for creativity.
It is very creative, and I remember being. When I read this as again, I was probably 10 when I read this, I guess, being like very, finding that very intriguing, that idea. It's like watching a movie, like an old action movie or something where the bad guy has some weird weapon or something, you know what I mean? Where they have like some archaic weird weapon that they use. It's like not just a gun or a sword or something. It's like this. It's always cooler when the bad person has like a thing.
And interesting, yeah. And it is very feminine. It's almost like a variant on like poison lipstick.
Yeah. Which they play off of with the Kate's thing where she when she kills people she kisses them. Yeah. And they it's a slight variant on that kind of in a way. So
does Zero have the homeless missing mother backstory? Because it seemed to kind of come out of nowhere, and then at the end kind of briefly touched on, and then that it was kind of wrapped up very tidily at the end.
And it's pretty similar in the book. I would argue the book, as often the case with movies to books, the book, those details about Zero's life are sort of sprinkled in a little more over the course of the narrative as opposed to like in one scene. But the scene where he kind of tells his backstory to Stanley is very similar, where it's like while they're learning to read, or while he's learning to read and write, and he kind of just goes into his backstory a little bit. And again, the end is different than how the book does it, but we'll talk about that in a later segment. But yeah, it is his story is the same. He was homeless, he was left, and then he becomes a ward of the state and ends up in this prison camp, basically, because he stole some shoes. Spoilers.
How about the sploosh? Do you want to explain what sploosh is?
Yeah, let's explain sploosh.
What was that stuff?
Okay, that is not explained in the movie.
No, it's not.
At all. I mean, it's alluded to.
We're supposed to just like pick up on it.
Yeah.
We're supposed to like connect the dots, which is also how it is in the book, but I think the book maybe just does it a little better.
No, they explicitly mention what, Anyways, go ahead.
Okay, so the sploosh that they drink, that they find in the boat in the wreck of the Mary Lou, is it's the old jars of spiced peaches that Kate Barlow makes.
Kate made these.
Yeah.
And it's mentioned in the movie in like one scene that she makes great like Trout Walker is like she makes great peaches.
He's like, I like her peaches.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, and that's the double meaning there is intentional. Yeah. But
and we see her give some to Sam.
Yeah.
In the movie.
But it's mentioned explicitly in the book so that you would not forget that, where they're like, there's several lines talking about how great her peaches are, and she makes these spiced peaches, and they can them, and they eat them over the course of the winter, and they last for a long time, and they're really, really good. And it's obvious to us when we get to the boat later what they're eating. It's way less obvious in the movie.
And now I don't recall in the movie when Stanley and Zero are eating the sploosh, do they say that it tastes like peaches?
Yeah.
I think, yes.
Shia Labeuof is like, it kind of tastes like peaches, but it's just like black like goo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks
Which
really
it is,
gross.
Yeah, and that's intentional too, because it is really old, and it's the same thing in the book where they get sick from it. Well, Zero gets sick from eating it. Even though it kind of keeps him alive, it also has like botulism in it or something. And
Yeah,
like
Totally.
I mean,
it almost kills him in the book, and in the movie. Kind of, they don't play it up as much in the movie, but we'll get to it. But yeah, sploosh. So that's the first instance of sploosh. Is the
Sploosh
the
makes a
species.
comeback.
Yes,
and
which
then
makes a
they
comeback.
when Stanley's dad invents the cure for smelly feet.
Yeah.
They also name that Sploosh,
Yeah,
which
and that
is
is
also from the book.
Also from the book, same thing.
It's a great name. The line while they're going up the mountain, Shia Labeuof says, "Imagine how fine Mary Lou looked in a bikini." Again, adult content. I thought this was Disney. Was that line in the book?
Not exactly. The spirit of that line
I mean,
is there's a
almost
variation
exactly,
of it.
Yeah.
She says, "I bet she looked great in a bathing suit."
So they're discussing Mary Lou when they see the name on the boat, and Zero and Stanley are discussing it, and they say
They're like, "Oh, I wonder who she was."
yeah, and Stanley basically says, I think it's Stanley says, or maybe it's Zero, I can't remember, but one of the two says, "Imagine how good she must have looked in a bathing suit for somebody to name a boat after her," or something like that. So yeah, it's a bit, it's a
bit
weird,
more respectful.
yeah, kind of. But it's also, they are 13-year-old kids.
Yeah.
They're talking like 13-year-old kids.
But
so.
it's funny because we know she was a donkey.
Yeah, we know she was a donkey. So. Oh,
I
maybe
didn't know
you
that.
didn't know she was a donkey. I don't know how clear that is in the movie.
Yeah, Mary Lou is the donkey.
Yeah.
You know what? Until you just said it recently, I didn't even realize that was the boat that he was killed on. I didn't even get that. I was like,
yeah.
who's Mary Lou?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I didn't
there
pay
is-
attention, I guess, hard enough.
No, you're fine. There's a lot of details, and the movie, and this is when we get to our final verdict and throughout the course, the movie doles out a lot of information in sort of starts and goes that makes it, I think, a little hard to follow at times. Not
Yeah.
hard to follow, like the main narrative is easy to follow. But some of those details, especially because we're jumping between time periods and
Yeah.
stuff, can be a little hard to put together. It's much easier in the book.
Yeah, this story really leans on, I think, your ability to connect the dots.
Yeah.
And in the book, I think it works out really nicely and it's all very clever. In the movie, I think some of the smaller dots are harder to connect.
Yeah. It's also hard because in the book, you're reading them. So when
Yeah.
you see the name Mary Lou and then you see it again later and you see it again, like it's every time it's really like doubling down and remembering, oh yeah, that's the donkey. Oh yeah,
Right.
that's the name on the boat. Whereas a lot of times in the movie, it's an offhand line where Sam mentions, "This is my donkey, Mary Lou," and
then later on you see the name
then
Mary
you see
Lou,
the
but
name
you
Mary
might
Lou,
not.
and you're like not connecting
Right.
it. Yeah,
It's the smaller dots that are harder to connect,
Yeah.
I think.
yeah,
Yeah, and it was just really fast. Like the
Yeah.
scenes
Yeah.
were jumping back and forth, and it was just kind of hard to kind of keep up with it, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that this is one of those movies that I think stands well enough on its own, and we'll get to it, but is also very greatly benefits from having read the book because those dots are a lot easier to connect in that regard. So, got a couple more questions. What's your next one?
Speaking of the Mary Lou boat, Suicide by Lizard, and Patricia Arquette's, she meets some bandits or whatever, and they're like, "You're gonna wish you were dead," and she says, "I've been wishing I was dead for a long time," which is really sad.
Yeah, it is. It is a
Yeah.
brutal line.
So in the book, it's I've been wishing I was dead for the last 20 years.
Yeah,
So similar,
similar.
but not exactly the same. So the people who come and threaten her and want her to take them to her buried loot are Trout Walker.
Which I don't know how clear this is in the movie.
Yeah, I don't. It's not
yeah,
super clear.
Yeah, see,
Didn't
I
get
wouldn't
that.
be. That doesn't remotely surprise me because I had a hard time realizing that was Trout Walker,
I
even though they
think-
say it. But
Well,
it's-
they say it, but I think that's also why they gave him a gold tooth.
oh, it still wasn't
Yeah.
enough to me. I don't think.
Because he doesn't have a gold tooth in the book.
No.
It's not mentioned.
No.
But
I-
I think that's why they did that, to try to visual cue us.
I think they needed to cast a more distinctive looking human being in that role if they wanted, or something. Because
Yeah.
he's just kind of a generic looking guy, and then later he's like still generic looking and also wearing a hat.
And also like dirty.
So it's like
old age makeup too, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a little tough, but that is the guy who killed Sam.
Yeah, so it's him and then the woman that he ended up marrying.
Yeah.
See, I think I was getting him confused with the warden, or not the warden, the like police chief or whatever that also was trying to make out with her, and then she shoots him. So there was two bad guys in that time period.
Yes, and they're vaguely similar looking.
Yes.
You're not wrong. So that's again, they're generic looking white
Generic
guys.
white guys, yeah.
So it makes sense, but because I had a feeling as I was watching, I was like, I feel this would be hard to know who is who here and what's going on unless you're like really like zeroed in on like every detail.
This is why we need somebody who hasn't read the book.
I know, that's why it's there. Yeah, that's the whole premise of this podcast. We nailed it. But yeah, the line is there, and she does die by lizard. She does not pick it up and like have it bite her in the book. She just is sitting there, and it crawls onto her and bites her, and she just like lets it bite her.
Yeah.
Like, but she doesn't actively like have it bite her. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other, similar.
Yeah, kind of reminded me of like, didn't Cleopatra like take a poison snake and like let
an
it bite
asp,
her?
I think. Yeah. Right.
Like,
a black
like
or adder.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, something like that. Yes, she did, and I think it's definitely allusions to that for sure.
Was John Voight's secret name Marion?
Oh boy. We're going to get to this. We got a lot to say about this later.
The short answer is no.
The short answer is no. I have a whole diatribe in my final verdict about it, and we have thoughts on it later. So if you're interested in that, we're going to put a pin in it, and we'll get back to it later.
Okay.
Final question.
The very last line of the movie is voiceover says, I guess you have to fill the rest of the holes yourself, which is a cute pun, but... What's he talking about? Does he mean the holes in the story? Plot holes? I was confused.
So it's not the final line of the book, but it is in the book, and it kind of sets up the epilogue. The epilogue in the book, I think, is a little bit more vague, so that might be what that line is referencing.
Yeah,
part of the epilogue, not the whole entire thing, because we do get the scene where they're like at the party and they watch the commercial for Sploosh for the first time. But the other part of the epilogue kind of slides into that like kind of clinical style that I was talking about earlier, where the narrator like takes a step back and he's like, "Here's what happened." So that line about like filling in the rest of the holes yourself, I think is like, okay, reader, you know what happened, you fill in the details.
Yeah, the line is, so the narrator, is describing kind of what's happening, and it says, but it would be boring to go through all the tedious details of all the changes in their lives. Instead, the reader will be presented with one last scene, which took place almost a year and a half after Stanley and Hector left Camp Green Lake. You will have to fill in the holes yourself. Yeah. And again, like Katie was saying, that last scene that we get in the book it's way more vague on, I say way more, it's still pretty obvious, but it's a little more vague on who's there and what all happened, and so we're kind of left to pick up the pieces. I think the main difference, like with, and I was looking through the books, I didn't hear if you mentioned this, but with Hector's mom and the reunion between Zero and his mom is not remotely the same in the book and the movie, where in the movie it's this like running tearful reunion where they hug and it's very clear, and there's like a voiceover, I think, where Stanley says, and he did hire a personal
private investigator
to find his mom. The book doesn't say that. All we get in the book is a scene where they're in the living room watching this commercial that comes on, and Hector is described as sitting in front of a lady in a chair, and she's playing with his hair.
Well, the book does say that he hired a private investigator.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it says that, but
that was a walnut.
Oh, a walnut. This freaking walnuts. I always think somebody's breaking into our house. Walnuts fall off our tree onto our roof, and it sounds like we're being attacked. But yeah, so like the last scene is kind of vague. It's like, so it doesn't explicitly say, and then Hector's mom was sitting there playing with his hair. It was just like this woman who looks like him, and you know, like the prose is written in a way where the whole book, Hector has been described as having a smile too big for his face, and that's how they describe this lady who's sitting behind him, and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of like the pun with filling in the holes. Is like, I'm not going to give you every exact answer, but you can figure it out.
Do we know like what happened to his mom? Why did she disappear? Or is that just one of those things that they don't really tell you?
That's a hole that you'll have to fill in for yourself.
Yeah.
I assume she was on drugs. She's probably...
Potentially. The vibe I got was that potentially she was a sex worker, maybe, is kind of the implicit. Yeah. It's never really because there's, and it's in the movie where Hector says, but he doesn't go into as much detail as he does in the book about how there were times when his mom would leave him places and he would have to stay. Like, he's like, sometimes she'd leave me because I couldn't go everywhere with her because she had to do things where I couldn't be there or something like that.
Which, to me, that implies maybe a sex worker.
Or something like that. And he talks about being left on stoops, on park benches, on that sort of thing at times. And she would always say, stay here, I'll be back in, an hour or whatever. And so that was the vibe I got this time. As a kid, I didn't remotely.
I don't know that I picked up on that as a kid.
But that was definitely, I think, maybe potentially what was going on there. And I forgot, I should add that to my notes for later. But sort of the humanizing of sex workers and that sort of thing. But so I think that's what's going on with something like that. And then she does just leave him on the playground one day, and we don't know why or how or what happened. I think it's probably the implication that it wasn't by choice necessarily.
Yeah. Because previous to that, she always comes back for him. And we get the vibe that she loves him, that she cares about him.
Yeah, and that is illustrated later when she does return and that sort of thing. So, Yep. Okay. All right. That was it for Was That in the Book? Our next segment is Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
So Lost in Adaptation is a segment where it's similar to Was That in the Book, a little more specific in the sense that if you're watching the movie that's been adapted from something, sometimes you're like a little lost.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a second, what?
Wait a minute.
What? I don't see the connection here. We've talked about some of those things already. Again, some of this kind of gets mixed up with Was That in the Book at times. It's fine. That's how it works. But that's the goal of this segment, is to kind of untangle any webs that maybe exist for somebody who didn't read the book and only watched the movie. So April's got a few questions for us. April, what's your first question?
Did the beginning of the book set up the characters and the world better in a more cohesive fashion? As in the first 5 minutes of the movie, the whole setup of his family and then the shoe stealing incident and then him going to jail was very, very rushed. And I was kind of like, what? We're already only 5 minutes, and I wasn't really sure kind of what happened.
Yeah, that's definitely, the movie moves it along.
The movie front loads it. And now we do obviously get some important information up front in the book, the information that we need to know to get the story rolling.
Yeah.
But overall, the book takes info reveals at a much leisurely pace.
Much more leisurely.
Yes. The moving parts that are involved in this story, in both of our opinions, work a lot better together in the book.
Yeah, so in the movie, you really quickly get all of this information dumped on you right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the like you said, where it's the family, it's we get the opening shot, the cold open of the kid at Camp Green Lake with the rattlesnake and that sort of thing, and then we jump to Stanley and his family, and then he's going to this camp, and all this stuff happens really quickly, and that kind of continues throughout the movie, where the way they drop information on you kind of goes back and forth really quickly between flashbacks and current time and all that sort of stuff. The book, it takes its time a lot more with that. They're kind of spaced out into chapters.
Yeah.
There's a couple chapters where it is interspersed within the chapter between Stanley's timeline and the past, but mostly it's like we'll get a chapter of the flashback and then that'll wrap up, and then we'll get a chapter of Stanley currently.
And as far as Stanley's storyline and how he ended up at Camp Green Lake and what the deal with his family is, the book makes way more use of Stanley's memory and his internal thoughts.
Yeah.
So we're able to get information about his family and his situation in a way that is more meted out.
Yeah.
Rather than getting it boom
Dumped
all at the beginning.
And I think the movie would have been more successful in that regard if they had done that. I don't think they felt they needed to justify immediately who Stanley was, why he was at this place. Whereas the book is we're introduced to Stanley going to that place if I remember correctly. I think so. Our first introduction to Stanley is him on the bus, which I guess is the same in the movie.
Yeah, it was like that, but then it jumps backwards in time immediately.
And I think it just feels better when you're reading it from Stanley, because Stanley will give us in the book, he'll give us a little tidbit of his memory where he'll say like, and I wouldn't be headed to this camp if it wasn't for those shoes. And then we'll just move on and we won't talk about what those shoes were, but you'll just remember something about shoes. And then a couple chapters later, he'll go a little more into the story of his memory of what happened. And so it kind of gets piecemealed out over the course of the book in a way that feels, you feel less ambushed by so much information.
It's not dissimilar to a mystery story.
It is,
where we get little tidbits of information and then we're putting it all together as we read.
Yeah, the whole book really is the ultimate sort of mystery unraveling over the course of the book. And it translates a little in the movie, but I don't think quite as well, which again, we'll talk about in our final verdict. That's kind of our big thing that is the difference between the two.
Why was Stanley's dad, aka Henry Winkler, obsessed with curing foot odor?
AKA the Fonz.
Right.
AKA Jean-Ralphio and whatever her name, Mona Lisa's dad. I don't know if you watch Parks and Rec, but
I do.
So in the book, he's not obsessed with curing foot odor. That's actually not his obsession. His obsession is recycling tennis shoes.
Yeah.
He wants to come up with a way, like a super
great way to recycle old tennis shoes.
And ultimately, somehow that ends up leading to him figuring out how to cure foot odor. I will say that I think the movie's change of him just being obsessed with foot odor the whole time maybe makes more sense.
Yeah.
But more importantly in the book, and the movie doesn't explain this, is that he's not always just obsessed with that, like with curing foot odor or whatever. His dad is an inventor. Mm-hmm. And so he comes up with an invention, he works on it for 6 months, a year, and then he fails at it, and then he moves on to something else. Mm-hmm. And so he's had dozens of these ideas that he comes up with.
Classic creative type.
Yeah, he's my dad. Sorry, Dad. But my dad's successful, I guess. But
he's me with writing projects.
Yeah, there you go. So he comes up with an idea, he fails at it because of the curse or whatever reason, and then moves on to something else. Whereas in the movie, he's just seemingly always been obsessed with curing foot odor, and that's
just like his thing.
That's just his thing. He doesn't have a foot odor fetish in the.
Yeah, maybe they just thought it was a funnier idea, you know?
No, I think so. Yeah, because then they could just have his whole house filled with shoes and all that nonsense.
Yeah. So. Next question: how does everyone know about Kate Barlow? That's Kissing Kate Barlow, I guess her name is. The cowgirl. Is she a local legend? Because Stanley and Zero both seem to know who she is because they find, I guess I don't know if it's when they find it, but they were talking about the lipstick and they were like, oh, KB must stand for this girl. And also, if they're from the city, how do they know this person is seemingly in this remote country area?
So this is a little bit different in the book. I don't think Zero knows who she is.
I don't think so.
Initially,
it doesn't seem like it in the book from my memory.
Or at least it's not mentioned.
No.
Stanley obviously knows her because of the family story where she robbed his great-grandfather.
Yes, which kind of gets to some of your future questions here, which we'll get to in a second. But
Now, I also got the vibe, and I got this more so from the movie than from the book, that maybe she's supposed to be similar to like a Jesse James or like a Billy the Kid type figure, like an outlaw who's
like famous
now like
legend.
Passed into legend and become this like larger than life figure.
Yeah. It's not described that way as much in the book, but yeah, it's definitely, it is, there's some people know about her in the book, and it's similar in the movie. And then the thing in the movie that sets off the reason that Stanley, even though he already knows who she is because of the story, the thing that triggers his memory of her when that triggers the conversation with Zero about it is when he goes into the warden's house. And I would not have noticed this if I wasn't looking out for it. He goes into her house, and when he goes to get her fingernail polish, she has all of these Kissin' Kate Barlow like newspaper clippings on her wall,
right?
Because she's obsessed with her and finding the treasure. And he sees her name a bunch of times, and then it's that scene after that he like has the epiphany, like, oh, the KB is probably Kate Barlow or whatever. So I think that's what the movie was going for, at least in what triggers his memory. But yeah, I think it's also just more of like a legendary figure amongst the people. So, or whatever.
A tall tale, if you will.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I didn't get the whole treasure chest thing at the end. Was it Kate's treasure? Why did it say Stanley Yelnats printed on it? Now, after I wrote this down, I had a little think about it. Here's what I think happened.
Okay.
Was it just Stanley's box? And she stole his box and put her, like the original Stanley, and put her treasure treasure in it. Is that what happened?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
The box belonged to Stanley's great-grandfather, who was the one that she robbed the stagecoach. Robbery.
Yeah, see, that happened so fast at the beginning. I didn't know what was happening or who anyone was. And it was, I was too many characters at first, so I just didn't, I missed that whole thing.
Yeah. And now the movie does the one thing I thought was interesting the movie does is they actually show you his name on the crate at the beginning. But again, if you're in that scene, I'm way more interested and worried about, you barely even know what Stanley Yelnats's name is at that point. So seeing that name doesn't mean a whole lot. And you're more interested in who this badass chick is who's robbing the stagecoach. And you don't really.
I also think the movie kind of glosses over, because it is important that our Stanley, the main character, is Stanley Yelnats the Fourth.
And it does say that in the movie. Yeah. He says the fourth at one point.
Right, they say it, but I think they kind of gloss over it because it's kind of important that he has the same name as his great-grandfather, because then when they find the chest, they can be like, well, actually, it has Stanley's name on it.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that movies have a hard time doing, where in the book it's reiterated 4 or 5 times over the course of the first 100 pages that every Stanley has been Stanley Yelnats, and that he's Stanley Yelnats the Fourth, and that he talks about his great-great-grandfather, who was also, like, it's mentioned numerous times. So by the time you get to the end of the book, it's super cemented in your brain. Every Stanley, or his great-great-grandfather has also Stanley Yelnats, and that's all kind of locked in. Whereas the movie has to mention it once because they got a million other things to do in the first act, and then you kind of get lost in the mix.
Yeah.
But do you only meet 3 generations of Yelnats? And by that I mean, like, there's 2 Yelnats flashbacks, right? There's the pig stealer and the guy whose stagecoach got robbed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he's stagecoach guy. I didn't even know who he was because he was barely in the movie at all. And
That's also confusing because the guy with the pig is Elia. His name's not Stanley.
Yeah.
His name's Elia Yelnats, and you don't even find out he's a Yelnats until like the end of the movie. But he is also, and so he is like the great-grandfather.
He's 5 times great.
Or whatever, yeah.
And then he comes to America and marries a woman who realizes that his last name, Yelnats, is Stanley backwards.
Yes.
So she names their son Stanley, and then it becomes a family tradition.
Where they all name him Stanley.
And then we get our Stanley Yelnats.
And I think it's even hard to explain because it's just a million Yelnats and Stanleys and blah, 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 generations. And it all gets very confusing very quickly. But yeah, in the book, it is the same thing where we see Elia Yelnats, who's the pig carrying guy, who is wooing people in Latvia, and we see the guy who gets robbed in the stagecoach. Those are the 2 Yelnats flashbacks we get in the book.
Yeah,
which is the same thing in the movie, but it's a little confusing at who's who. So, but yeah.
Okay, this kind of goes into the next question, which is what is the connection with the Yelnats family and Kate Barlow, other than maybe that she robbed him at one point?
Yeah. Because
it seems like there's 2 separate curses going on. Because after Sam is killed, they say the lake dried up. So it was like, like they did wrong, and by the nature is like, Lion King style, like going back on them and saying, okay, this land is drying up. And then the whole hauling the old lady up the mountain, who was Eartha Kitt, by the way. It was Catwoman herself.
Yes.
That's like a whole other thing. And then the curses seem to like solve at the same time, kind of. And also, what was the deal with it raining at the end? Like, what triggered that?
Okay.
Right. Katie, you wrote a bunch of notes.
Yeah, I'm going to try to suss this out. So I think the robbery is the only like real connection between the Yelnats family and Kate Barlow. I think.
Yeah.
So there are two curses in a sense, but the book doesn't ever refer to the lake drying up as a curse specifically, the way that it does with the Yelnats family curse. So when Kate and Sam kiss in the book, the town busybody, who it's a different character than it is in the movie. Yeah, it's not Trout Walker in the book. But the town busybody sees them and like points at them from the distance and says, "God will punish you."
Yeah.
Then they kill Sam, and we get that whole horrific scene. And then the narrator gives us these lines. I'm going to read a quote from the book. "That all happened 110 years ago. Since then, not one drop of rain has fallen on Green Lake. You make the decision. Whom did God punish?" So there's this implication that the curse is the townspeople being punished for their racism and for their violence. And the book does say that it started to rain as Stanley and Zero left Camp Green Lake, but the book is like way more concerned with fleshing out the Yelnats family curse, so there's not a clear reason why those same events would resolve the Green Lake situation.
Yeah, that's how I explained.
I like the explanation that maybe the treasure being found by the right people, i.e. not the ancestor of Trout Walker, the warden, maybe that appeases the vengeful ghost of Kate Barlow.
Yeah. So in case it wasn't clear, the warden is the great-great-granddaughter or whatever of Trout Walker, who's the guy who killed Sam and the guy who was trying to find the treasure and was going to kill Kate Barlow, but then she got bit by the lizard and died. So that his name's Trout Walker, and he's like the town's rich asshole who was in the flashbacks, like trying to get her to kiss him and go out with him, and she's like, "I don't want to go out with you," and all that sort of stuff. And he was like entitled dickhead. So then Warden's been looking for it for all these years. She doesn't find it, but Zeroni and Stanley do, and by them finding it, this now Kate Barlow's ghost is like, "Cool, we're good here.
Let the rain
fall." Yeah.
So it could have been a coincidence, but
yes,
it's all happening at the same time. Another question: well, why didn't Kate kill Mr. Trout then? If that's who could, the guy she shoots in the face
is the sheriff.
Yeah,
the sheriff,
I mean, he wasn't a good guy either. But why didn't she avenge him?
I don't know if she couldn't find him, because that's never actually addressed in the book, that she doesn't actually, she goes on a big spree where after Sam dies, she just becomes an outlaw and starts robbing trains and whatever. And I guess the implication, because again, it's not really ever addressed, is that she just never either goes after him or can't find him, maybe is the thing. Like maybe he disappears somewhere or something. No, because he stays there. He stays in Green Lake, but they lose all their money.
Maybe the sheriff was just an easier mark.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, see, the sheriff shooting isn't in the book, though.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed it. Okay, I just don't remember. But yeah, so I think, she went after the sheriff because he explicitly was this authority that could have saved things. And didn't.
He could have put a stop to the whole thing, but he didn't.
And exacerbated things. And so she goes after him, and then that's a slight plot hole potentially that for whatever reason she doesn't go after Trout Walker. I'm not, because you would think obviously she would. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't she? And it's really just kind of not addressed in the book. So
does she shoot him before she kills herself? I can't even remember.
No, in the movie, no. Or the book, no.
No. Okay.
And she does that on purpose, though. But that is her final revenge, is that he's like, "There's treasure out here," and she's like, "Yeah, you'll never find it."
Oh, that's almost a third curse.
Yes.
Because she says, like, you and your family, your children and your children's children can look for 100 years, you'll never find it. Yeah. That's curse language.
It is. And she says you'll dig holes for 100 years looking for it or whatever. Yeah. So, like, that is her revenge. And as opposed to killing him, she just lets him spend the rest of his life digging holes looking for this gold that he thinks is out there, which to her is a worse fate than just her shooting him right there or whatever. So
that's good.
That's kind of the implication. Yep. Cool. That was it for Lost in Adaptation. Now we're going to get into where we compare and contrast the book and the movie a little bit more in depth and do better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
All right, so first segment is Better in the Book. This is where with me and Katie are going to talk about things that we thought were better in the book. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty obvious, pretty easy. Katie, go first. What's up?
This first note is your note.
It's my note. I don't remember. We changed. They're all in random order. There's only 2 trees in the book at the lake. In the movie, there's like around the compound that they're in, there's like a whole like forest, like a little forest there.
Yeah, there are several trees.
Yeah. In the book, it is explicitly there are 2 trees. And the only 2 trees that are there, the warden has tied a hammock between them that she sits in.
Those are her trees.
And those are her trees. And I like that. It makes it feel way more desolate even than it does in the movie, I feel like. And way more hopeless if there's literally only 2 trees. And the warden is like, nah, I get to lounge on these trees. So it's just a little thing, but... Go ahead, Katie.
I have a note on the yellow spotted lizards. And this was an initial note that I made right off the bat when we see the first lizard. Because I thought it was silly looking.
Ooh.
Like the one that like goes Jurassic Park and like rears up on its back legs and runs at Shia Labeuof. I was like, man, this is silly. We're supposed to be scared of these things.
Yeah.
So I thought that was better in the book.
Yeah, because in the book, obviously, it's your imagination as opposed to a little CG.
Yeah, a little CG lizard
Running around.
The non-CG ones looked good, but whenever they had to do anything, it turned into like. Do you guys know Reboot? The show Reboot?
Yes,
it looked like that.
They're reboot lizards. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. They're not. I mean, it's 2003.
Yeah.
You would think. I even still felt like. Maybe don't look as good as they could even for 2003. I feel like.
I think if they hadn't tried to make it do things,
yeah,
it would have been fine.
I guess that's the thing. There was no reason for it to like. I mean, although in the book it is described that they will like leap at you, like that's what they say. But I honestly, in the book, I always took that as not true. My always like, and I even this time, and even as a kid, I always took because they're described in the book as having very strong legs and they will like jump on you and bite you. I always took that as like the myth about them because they are deadly or whatever.
Yeah,
that people like added this like they'll jump 20 feet on your neck and bite you when actually it's just like if you step on one or near one, like similar to like a. People, the stuff people come up with about spiders and snakes and things that scare them, like, oh, it'll leap across the room at you. It's like, well, not actually. And so, but the movie's like, no, actually, they will like run and jump and it'll look terrible. Well, I think it would be better if, like you said, if it was just use the real, because they're like bearded dragons that they like painted or whatever. And they look great when they're just painted bearded dragons. Just use those and just have them be kind of like hanging out and making hissing noises.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not great.
Don't have them rear up on their back legs and run at you.
Just to be clear, Colin didn't work on this, did he?
I'll have to ask him. No, he's never heard of this movie. Or he's never heard of this. I think maybe he's heard of it, but he didn't know anything about it. So yeah.
So in case any of our listeners don't know, Colin works still. I don't know if he still does. I guess he does. I don't know.
He still does visual effects. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he's a visual effects artist, and he's worked on a handful of movies. And I know one of the things. Did he work on the Wolverine? One of the Wolverine movies.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah. One of the not great Wolverine.
X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the boys at the camp and their kind of demeanor in the movie, because I felt like they were meaner and like nastier in the movie than they were in the book. A little bit.
I don't disagree. Yeah.
Just like a little. I think the movie goes harder on them than the book does. Because in the book, I think we get a better feel for like how the group dynamic works, and like they're rough around the edges and they're tough with each other. But I feel like in the book, the ultimate takeaway is that they've been dealt a really raw hand.
Yeah.
But they aren't actually bad people.
Right.
Like they're not the warden or Mr. Sir or Mr. Pendansky.
Yeah. I think the book or the movie does a slight disservice to him in that we don't get, and I think, like I said earlier, I think the movie tried to go back and try to fix that a little with like some added levity scenes of them like getting along. Because in the book, it's it felt very true to life to me of like these kids they've done bad things but they're not bad kids, but they're also in a situation to where they wouldn't be super nice all the time because they're in this terrible situation with terrible, cruel people, running their lives. They're going to be kind of shitty sometimes to each other. Yeah. And I think they just, like you said, I think the movie just goes a little too hard on that. Yeah. But a lot of the same scenes do happen I think what it is that in the book, in the movie, a lot of the same scenes where they're mean also happen in the book, but we don't get all of the downtime in the book where they're like hanging out and chit-chatting and like being cool with each other, though, because that's not important to the plot, quote unquote. You know what I mean? Like in the movie, so they kind of cut that out. So they kind of tried to do it with like, look, they're dancing, they like each other, moving on, like whatever. But yeah, I do agree that it does kind of undercut the ultimate message that we're getting to, that these kids aren't just like
they're
bad.
not villains.
They're not bad. Yeah. They're just, they made a mistake or whatever. So yeah, I agree. In the book, the warden, and this scene's not in the movie at all, when they find the lipstick in the hole, they start digging, and she gets mad that they're not finding anything because they're digging in the wrong hole, but she doesn't know it. Mm-hmm. She stabs Armpit in the chest with a pitchfork. Yeah. Which is crazy.
That's intense.
Yes. She's like really upset because they're not finding anything, and Armpit says something, and I say stab, she like pokes him with it, but it pierces his shirt and he starts bleeding and then falls backwards into a hole. Oh, and that's like our first moment with the warden where we're like, oh. Yeah. Oh. And I like it because it happens before I think it happens before the clawing scene.
Yes.
Yes. And I like it because it's that first moment of like, oh no. Like it like, because she seems kind of cool, maybe, potentially. Before that moment, we don't know, and then it's like, oh no, she's real bad. Yeah, she's real bad. And the fact that she does it to a kid instead of just Mr. Sir, we also hate, like it's a kid who we kind of like. It makes it very clear that like, she's not good.
That's our first like really big indication that this is definitely not someone to be trusted. Yeah. I'm not sure that the movie gets Trout Walker quite right. No. He's definitely an asshole. Definitely a racist asshole. But in the book, he's really dumb and really nasty. And I don't think that came through in the movie.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he's just kind of like obnoxious in the movie, whereas in the book, he feels way more entitled. But also gross. Like he's just
right. Like the movie took him to this like pretty boy douchebag trope. Yeah, which isn't terrible. Like that can work. I just don't know if it works as well as what the book does.
I also don't think that I think the thing the movie lacks the most with his character is that he's not memorable. Yes. As made clear earlier when April was like not sure who is who and that sort of thing. Yeah. Because he's just not memorable. You're confusing him with the sheriff. You're confusing him with other people in the town. Like he's not interesting enough and distinct enough, which he should be because he's like the main bad guy in the flashback scenes. Yeah. Like he should be this big bad character. So I like a lot about what they do with Kate and Sam's love story in the movie. I think overall it captures a lot of the big moments of it, but their actual big kiss in the movie, it happens in the schoolhouse, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But in the book, it's like a very dramatic moment where she runs out on the street and it's pouring down rain and they kiss in the rain on the street. Yeah. And it's very, very dramatic.
It's very heady.
Yes. And I like it a lot. And so, I wish they had been able to do that in the movie because it just didn't feel quite as. I was expecting this big it's a big romance movie.
Yeah, it's a crescendo moment that then gets undercut by somebody seeing them. Yeah,
and the book it just doesn't quite have the same build up and
in the movie you mean?
Sorry, the movie doesn't quite have. Yeah, I do that all the time. So bad.
I know
it's so hard.
It's okay, we forgive you.
Thank you. You do. April doesn't have to forgive you.
I'll think about it.
Okay. I've always thought it was dumb that they when they're climbing the mountain, that Madame Zeroni's flashback plays over them climbing the mountain to remind us as viewers.
I hate that.
Remember, this is a thing. the family was cursed because they didn't carry a Zeroni, and now he's carrying a Zeroni. Do you get it? And now I think it's probably necessary because of all we've talked about in terms of like how many different plot lines are going on in this movie that it might be hard to follow otherwise. But is that what you're feeling, April?
I was like, oh, when that happened.
Yeah.
So like it did help me. But I mean, after like what we were saying, like I feel like if I just like, because this is the first time I watched it, maybe if I watched it again, I would pick up more on the
I think you
foreshadowing.
would for sure.
For first time viewer, it was a bit much.
Yeah, I think for sure that if you're watching this a second time, that you would catch everything you needed to catch because there's so much information. But in the book, there's obviously no voiceover there, and it's not even like there's nothing even saying in the narrator or nothing. Nobody is going like, "Hey, remember this thing from earlier." It's just kind of after the fact we get this reminder. Yeah, this little like moment that reminds us, and then it hits you then after the fact. That after this happens, you're like, oh, you have that moment of, oh man, oh yeah, which is cool. It's just slightly better in the book. It's hard to describe without actually like reading
it is really hard to describe, but there is that moment close to the end of the book where everything clunks into place. And as a reader, it is a truly satisfying moment. Like I would put Holes up with like Harry Potter. In that it's something that I wish I could read for the first time again.
The first time you read it.
Like, I fervently wish I could read this book for the first time again.
And the first time all of those storylines click into place it's fantastic. It's just so well done in a way that the movie doesn't quite capture.
Yeah.
I really like in the book, and this doesn't happen in the movie, that Stanley has to dig for water on the mountain. It just seems like a duh because like he's been digging holes this whole time. He finally gets good at digging holes. And so when he gets to the mountaintop,
gotta dig a hole, son.
He finds some mud, but there's no water or just mud. And so he's like, but if there's mud, there's probably water. And he starts digging and he gets down far enough and then he can get some water out of it. And I like the symbolism there. I like that, that he spent all this time digging holes. And then in order to save Zero and to do this, he has to dig a hole. I really like that. The movie's just like, there's a stream. There's a beautiful stream. Congratulations. Which it's fine. It's nice. But I like the book's version better. Also, Zero doesn't just magically become better in the book. Like in the movie, he just gets there and he like stands up and is like, "Cool, I'm fine now. I'm great. I ate an onion. I'm good." He takes like a week and a half.
Yeah, they're up there for a while.
Like days of him like slowly recuperating. Which again, I get it. It's a movie. You gotta move things along. It just feels a little like, and which there is magic in this movie. So sure, I guess, but it just feels more. It feels more grounded in the book.
So Zero in the book recognizes the song.
Yeah.
When Stanley starts singing it, and he does sing it while they're on the mountain.
Yeah.
At the Onion Oasis. But in the book, Zero is like Stanley starts singing it, and Zero's like, "Hey, my mom used to sing that to me." And he says like the words were different because it's two separate translations from the Latvian.
The Latvian to the English.
But like he knows it, which is another then clue of like who Zero is and how him and Stanley are connected.
Yeah, doesn't he say that in the movie though, that he recognizes it?
I
thought he did. I could be wrong though.
Don't recall it.
Yeah, I thought he did, but I could be wrong. Then I remember. I don't like in the movie, we mentioned the lawyer earlier in the Guess Who. I don't like her in the movie. She's like, she comes in the movie and she's like this like whiny, like she comes in and she's like, it's hard to describe. Her character in the book, she's very cool and collected and like on top of her game. She seems like a very competent lawyer who comes in and is like, just like shooting these assholes down and like he's like, "No, you're giving me Stanley. No, you're doing this. You're doing that. I know what I'm talking about." Whereas in the movie, we see when she's introduced, she's like yelling at them and like "No, man!" Like, and there's like 80-yard lines of her like it's very strange and it feels very counter to what the point of that character is, who's just to be this like. Again, ultimately, we get to this message that all of our good guys in this movie are people of color. They're immigrants. They're what's the word I'm looking for? Financially
disadvantaged.
Financially disadvantaged people or the people of color, or they're immigrants, and are all these things, and they're the ones who like win. They win in this book. And so I like her coming in the book and just being like, and just smacking down these like idiots who like run this camp and just being like, no.
And she is also, no offense to Stanley's parents, but she's our first like competent adult.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that is true. Because every other adult in this book is an idiot. Like is a complete idiot, other than kind of Stanley's parents, which are also kind of idiots.
His mom is not that bad.
No.
But
what about the grandpa? Oh, wait, he's not in the book, is he?
He's not in the book, yeah.
Yeah, he's not in the book. He just shows up in the movie. He's mentioned in the book, but he's not. His character is not in the book. But I really prefer her in the book, where she's just like competent lawyer doing stuff.
I don't know that it would work in the movie because it so rarely works in movies, but I do miss the narrator from the book.
Yeah. You can do it.
I think
they could have done it.
But I think it goes so wrong so easily. Voiceover narration.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. I think what they should have done is not had his grandfather in the movie, or had him in like one scene, the guy who played his grandfather, which I can't remember that actor's name. And had that guy do the voiceover. Have the grandfather telling this story to us.
Yeah.
In some way, because that makes sense. And then have him not be like a character that shows up in scenes, except for like maybe at the end or something like that.
Because I do think that the narrator is one of the things that makes all of the various moving parts work well.
And they try to do it with Stanley. Like he has some voiceover at time to like kind of explain things. But I don't think it works great. I think they should have made it a different character. So
yeah, I agree.
I like at the end that Pendanski just suggests shooting the kids. It's not the warden. In the movie, the warden's like, we should shoot him. But I like in the book that it's Pendanski, mainly because Pendanski this whole time has been, not this whole time. We'll talk about his character. Pendanski's a really interesting character to me because when we first meet him, he's he's like seemingly a good guy. He seems to care about the kids, but over the course of the book, it becomes revealed, and the movie becomes revealed more and more that he's actually just an asshole.
He's just not a good guy.
He's not a good guy at all. And I really like that. And I like that by the end of the book, he's just like, we should shoot these kids so we can get this money or whatever. Whereas in the movie, the warden suggests it, and he's like, wait, should we or whatever? He's an asshole. He should be the one who suggests they shoot the kids.
In the movie, he's more of just like an oaf. Just kind of like silly.
Just kind of generally useless.
Yeah. And like,
and that is how that's how he starts in the book, as like a seemingly well-natured oaf. And then he becomes very clearly more and more evil over the course of the book, which is really interesting to me. But
more and more of a bully.
Yeah, and I think I think it's a good message too of like for young people, you know, like you might run into people in your lives who are seemingly
who seem like they have your best interests at heart.
Best interests in heart, but actually are abusers or actually terrible people. I think that's a really, and the movie captures it a little bit, but I don't think quite as well. I love in the book that Green Lake. So the whole time, Mr. Sir, and we're almost done with this segment. Mr. Sir has been mentioning that this isn't a Girl Scout camp. You're not a Girl Scout camp, and he says this in the movie a couple times too. He's like, "You're not. This isn't the Girl Scouts. You're not in the Girl Scouts or whatever." But then it's mentioned in the epilogue that they have to sell Green Lake after it gets shut down or whatever. The warden has to sell it, even though it was in her family, but she's out of money. And it gets bought by the Girl Scouts and turned into a Girl Scout camp, which I think is a nice little, a fun little joke. It's mentioned in the movie where they say it got turned into a girls' camp. I don't know why they didn't say a Girl Scout camp.
Maybe they didn't have the rights or something.
Yeah, maybe there was a weird...
Mr. Sir says Girl Scouts numerous times.
I could see there being a difference in just mentioning the Girl Scouts and then like specifically saying this place became a camp for the Girl Scouts.
Maybe, I don't know. It seemed weird to me, but yeah, that's possible.
I don't even remember him saying this ain't no Girl Scout camp. So I must have missed
he only says it like, I think he says it like twice in the movie. He says it like every chapter in the book.
Yeah.
Like,
Basically,
so,
like every time he has a scene in the book,
Yeah,
he
he's
says
like,
something about it.
not the Girl Scouts, blah, blah, blah. And then the last one I had, and this is just a line from the book that I really like that's not in the movie. Just think it's a very well-written line, kind of a fun line. They're talking about how much money Stanley and Zero received.
From the treasure.
From the treasure. And it takes them a long time to figure it out, which I also like more in the book. In the movie, they're just like, oh, these are worth millions of dollars, and they start doling them out.
Well, like, how would Stanley know that?
Yeah, Stanley
how would
wouldn't
he
know
know?
that.
He
Yeah.
wouldn't.
He just knows
no
conversion rates.
Yeah. It's like, what? Okay. In the book, there's explicitly mentioned that it took lawyers and stuff like months to figure out how much all of this was worth or whatever.
Realistic.
Yeah, it's realistic. But I love the line in the book, though, is after taxes and fees, Stanley and Zero each received less than $1 million. And it's sort of set up because they think they've had this big windfall. And then it's like, oh, but the gems and the jewels aren't actually worth that much money. Mm-hmm. And then the line is, after taxes and fees, Stanley and Zero received each less than $1 million. But not a lot less, which I think is like a fun kind of, again, the subversion of you're like, oh, nice. They're still rich as shit. Like, cool. But yeah, it's just a little line. It's just not in the movie. Cool. That's it for Better in the Book. Better in the Movie. Let's go.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
So, Better in the Movie. Again, pretty self-explanatory. These are things that were better in the movie. Katie.
I thought that starting with Barf Bag baiting the rattlesnake was interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of neutral on the choice to like open with it.
Yeah.
But I did like that we got to see it happen because they do just talk about it.
I like opening with it explicitly because one, the movie or the book opens with the first chapter of the book isn't anything to do with Stanley or anything. It's a description of the camp. Yeah. And so we're kind of already opening at the camp and even in the book. And so I think taking a moment that we don't see. So in the book, we find out that Barfbag got bit by a rattlesnake, and we eventually later find out that he did it on purpose, but we don't ever really see the scene or anything in the book. I actually really like that in the movie. Starting that way, it kind of immediately sets the stakes for this camp and how miserable it is there, and like, oh, what's going on? Oh, this kid's intentionally letting himself get bit by a rattlesnake. What's happened? Like, it raises a bunch of questions, and I think it's an interesting cold open to your film. I think it works pretty well. So I agree that I do actually like starting it that way. The crazy inside of the Yelnats apartment, I think, is a good...
totally.
So in the movie or in the book, we don't really get much of a description of what the inside of their apartment looks like. But in the movie, we get to see all this craziness.
Yeah. And it's almost like Seussian with like the weird like machines going and contraptions and things.
And it's more Henry Winkler, which never complain about more Henry Winkler. I really enjoyed seeing Kissing Kate rob Stanley's great-grandfather. Again, it's just kind of vaguely mentioned in the book that she does rob him, but we actually get to see the scene happen in the movie, which is cool. Plus, we get the little quick shot of the chest with his name on it. Again, there's a lot of detail, so it's hard to catch, but for somebody who's a book reader, I was like, noticed it, and then it's one of those things because it's not really mentioned in the book.
And to their credit, they tried to tease that ahead of time.
They tried. It's just there's so much going on that it's tough,
and it's so quick.
Yeah.
This was a little thing that I loved.
No, it's really great.
When Stanley initially almost gets into a fight in the rec room at the camp, they break up the fight, and then we see Zero set down a pool ball that he had picked up and grabbed a pool ball and was like ready to throw it.
No, not ready to throw it.
Gonna punch someone.
Punch somebody. Hit somebody with it, yeah.
I don't get in fights.
I don't oh, you're right. Sorry. All the fights I've been in, I've hit a lot of people with pool balls in my life.
Well, he was going to do something with it.
Yeah, he was going to hit somebody with it, yeah.
All right, hit somebody, whatever. But I love it because it's this quick little moment that both, one, shows us his rough and humble upbringing.
Yeah, that he thinks about doing this.
He immediately thinks of...
grab a weapon.
Yeah. And in two, it shows us that he's already loyal to Stanley.
Already ride or die.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I agree. And that's not in the book at all. The fight is, like, Stanley does get into that kerfuffle, but we don't get the setup of Zero, like, wanting to help him and having this. Yeah,
it's a nice little character moment for Zero.
For sure. I love in the movie. I love the scene, the sequence where Patricia Arquette as Kate Barlow turns into Kissin' Kate, and the like montage of her riding around, shooting people and robbing people, and it's great.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's not really in the book. We just get like a couple lines of like, and then she went and robbed a bunch of people and like became an outlaw or whatever. Like it's just like she became an outlaw. Then it's like okay.
I mean, like the montage section, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like newspapers and flying everywhere.
Yeah, the fun spinning newspapers. And I don't love the music choices in this movie all the time. In particular, a couple explicitly, which I'll talk about. But I did like the montage. I like the spinning newspaper. I like just seeing her ride around, like the Old West, like the sped up footage, all that sort of stuff I thought was fun. And again, we don't really get much of that in the book, but I thought it was cool. And I want my Kissin' Kate spin-off movie. That's if you're gonna make a spin-off of this movie, it just needs to be her story.
Yeah.
After Sam dies and she becomes an outlaw, I want to watch that. I would watch that movie. That's all I'm saying. I love this moment in the movie, and it's not in the book. Not exactly. This is in the book. So when in the movie and the book, at one point, Zero hits Mom, Mr. Pendansky, in the face with a shovel and runs away. And Mr. Pendansky's been an asshole to Zero the whole time, and he's making fun of him for not being able to read or write in this moment. And he asks him what. So in the book, what happens is Mr. Pendansky asks Zero to spell cat, or no, he says, "What does CAT spell?" And Zero says chat because he
makes perfect sense.
Makes sense because he thinks the C sound makes the ch sound because it does sometimes. And then when they all make fun of him, then he hits Mr. Pendansky and runs away. In the movie, the change they make, and it's a very movie change, but I very much like it, is that Mr. Pendansky asks him, he does ask him to spell cat, but then he asks him, what does DIG spell? And I love Zero just looks at him and then hits him with a shovel and says dig and runs away. It's a movie moment, but it's such a great movie moment that I love it.
Yeah.
And it's so good. It just gets he gets to show him, I do know how to spell fuck you. Yeah. And then it's great.
They added a line that I thought was a good ad.
Yeah.
The line, nobody cares about Hector Zeroni, after he runs away.
Yeah, that's in the book.
That's in the book, but what they added for the movie is then Stanley coming up and saying, I do.
Yeah. It's just a little, again, it's a very movie line. Both of these feel very
Yeah.
We need this little cherry on this scene of like this thing happening. But I do really like it that Stanley comes in and goes, nah, I do.
Yeah.
And it just makes it more clear to the audience. I really like that when he cracks the secret. So sorry, not when he cracks the secret. When right after Stanley carries Zeroni up the mountain, Zero up the mountain, we cut to Stanley's dad in his kitchen, and he accidentally drops peaches into his mixture or whatever, and then he cracks it, and he's like, "Wow, I cured foot odor or whatever." I actually really like that. I think it makes it very clear to us as viewers, like, the relation between these two events, because it's not how it plays out in the book. We just find out later that his dad figured out the difference, or figured out how to fix this problem. And I also love that it's peaches that fall in, because we don't see that in the book. In the book, it's just mentioned that the mixture smells vaguely like peaches, like the foot stuff smells like peaches, but we actually see peaches fall in. It's like, oh, okay, cool, because we get the whole peaches thing. It's just it's more like,
peaches
interweaving
connection.
story
Doesn't
elements.
he say like it's peaches and onions?
Yes.
Onions, the other magical vegetable in this movie.
Yes, very clever. I really like when the rain falls on them at the end, where as they're leaving, it just starts pouring down rain, and they're all like standing in the rain. That's not in the book.
It's not in the book. No,
it's mentioned that it rains afterward.
Yeah,
but
like it starts to rain like as they're driving away.
Right, but we don't see them like.
Yeah, they don't get to play in the rain.
I think it's like it's a good it's your Shawshank moment where Andy Dufresne kneels down in the rain. Yeah, you get that moment. It's fun.
The Poseidon statue at the end of the movie where he's holding a shovel.
Yeah, I thought that was clever.
It's a fun ad.
Yeah, it's Poseidon with a shovel. It's makes sense. And then finally, the best change, the only change that matters in the entire movie, is that the credits roll and Shia LaBeouf starts rapping.
And he raps the plot of the movie.
He raps the plot of the movie.
Yes, that's like my favorite trope ever is when somebody raps the plot of the movie. And I was like, I bet that's one of the kids rapping. I didn't know it was Shia, but
that is
makes
Shia.
sense.
It's also X-Ray at one point. So there's several people.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it changes, like they each have like a verse or whatever. But at least one of the verses is Shia, and it's amazing. I love it a lot. It's terrible. It's
awful.
It's terrible, but also amazing. It's right in that wheelhouse of
early 2000s
Will Smith rapping about
movie.
being Jim West and what's his name rapping about sharks' fins or whatever and Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah.
Like,
was that
Ice?
Was that Ice?
One of the Ices.
Ice Cube?
Yeah, one of the Ices.
I think it was Ice Cube.
Rapping about sharks' fins. But I love it so much. And Shia LaBeouf got a writing credit on that song.
Really?
I looked at the credits. Shia LaBeouf, there's like 12 writers, but Shia LaBeouf is one of them. So. All right. That was it for Better the Movie. Real quick, we're going to do a movie. Nailed it.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
All right, movie nailed it. Pretty simple. This is the things that aren't better in one or better in the other. This is the things that were in the book that the movie just like crushed it.
Yeah. So I want to first special shout out to the three evil adults.
Yes, the three evil adults.
Sigourney Weaver crushes it. John Voight crushes it. What's his name that plays Pendanski?
The guy from,
crushes it.
Yeah, a million things.
Yeah.
Everything the Coen brothers have ever made.
Yeah.
He's been in, but
yeah, all three of them were brilliantly, beautifully cast.
yeah. No, they're all perfect for their role. All the kids, I think, honestly, too. Even like the supporting kids actors. Specifically, I think Zero's great casting. And that kid's not been in a ton of stuff even since then. But I like the thing in the book is it explicitly says that his smile is too big for his face. And I think that actor...
Yeah.
For some reason, when you see him, you're like, yeah, his smile. He has this big smile that just lights up his face, and I think it's perfect for that character.
When Stanley initially gets to the camp and Mr. Sir is like, "You want to run away? Go ahead.
Go ahead, run away." That whole scene's identical,
like almost verbatim,
word for word. Yeah, which I don't know if we mentioned this earlier. We mentioned it in the prequel, but this movie was adapted by Louis Sacker.
Yeah.
Sacker, yeah. The guy who wrote the book wrote the screenplay, so he included a lot of his lines that he wanted in there. And this is what, and not just the lines. To me, the thing that this movie really nails in terms of an adaptation is the details. Mm-hmm. All of these little things that if you're a book reader, if you read the book, that a lot of times like things like Harry Potter don't capture. Sometimes they do, but a lot of the little details are so spot on. Mm-hmm. That like they're like the clothing is identical, like the clothing that they wear, the orange jumpsuits, the hat with the thing that hangs down in the back to cover their necks and stuff like that. The water bottles, the water truck, like all of these little details. The dialogue is so identical in so many scenes.
Yeah, so much of it is pulled directly from the book,
word for word from the book. Like in almost every scene that is in the movie, there's some that's cut, but everything else is like identical. And then the like little details, like the when they drink the sploosh, they can't get it open, so they break it open on the shovel. It's again minute nonsense, but there's all little details from the book that if you read the book are like, yeah, this is the book I read. So there you go. And I also really like, and I mentioned earlier, but the Pendanski character arc from sort of seemingly good-natured oaf to evil asshole, the movie kind of captures perfectly. Even though he is slightly different.
Yeah, it's slightly different, but pretty much the same. Madame Zeroni and Ilya and that whole backstory with the pig stealing.
Yes. Yeah. The potentially problematic.
I have thoughts on it, but
yeah, potentially problematic portrayal of Latvian culture. I don't know, but we'll talk about it. It was interesting, but it is similar. The whole storyline, at least, is kind of identical to what happens in the book. They spit in the holes when they're done digging them. Mm-hmm. It's a little detail right out of the book, and then Stanley can't get out of his first hole. He struggles to get out of it. Again, little detail. I also liked Stanley writes letters home to his mom, and he like pretends that like it's like this fun summer camp that he's at, where he's like, we're doing this.
We learned to water ski.
We spent all day out on the lake. It was great. And then it's like, oh yeah, it's again right out of the book.
That was nice.
The way that Stanley gets his nickname of the caveman is the exact same.
Where he thinks they're talking about the guy he got in a fight with, but then it turns out they're talking about him, and he's like, wait, I'm caveman?
He's like, oh, I guess I'm caveman now.
Cool. All right, great. I like, again, I don't love all the details of the Sam and Kate storyline, but they do at least keep in the I can fix that recurring thing.
Iconic.
It's iconic. It's very reminiscent of As You Wish from Princess Bride. Where every time she asks him to do something, instead of saying, as you wish, he says, I can fix that. And then she says, I have a broken heart. And he says, I can fix that, and kisses her. It's great. It's great.
Aww. Oh, Sam.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
And then immediately off of that, the scene...
the polar opposite.
The polar opposite. The scene where the sheriff is drunk... where she goes to try to get him to stop them from burning the schoolhouse. Yeah. And he says, I always get drunk before a hanging.
Yeah. And then line that, and she goes, because it's illegal for him to kiss you. And she goes, well, I kissed him. And he goes, well, it's not illegal for you to kiss him. It's illegal for him to kiss you. Yeah. It's like, fuck, Jesus Christ. And then they kill Mary Lou. They shoot the donkey. They shoot Sam. It's a little more brutal in the book, but basically spot on, like we mentioned before. Yeah. The Zigzag Stanley fight is identical, where they get in a fight and then Mr. Pendansky like eggs him on and is like, fight him, hit him, Stanley. And then after they get into a fight for a little while, Zero runs in and almost chokes Zigzag to death. Same thing. And then everything that happens after that is identical to the movie or to the book.
And then Stanley stealing the truck. In the movie, it's kind of implied that it was a little more planned out.
Yeah, because he like walks up there with the guy who steals trucks with the kid who steals cars. Where in the movie or in the book, it's just like a spur of the moment decision. Yeah. He's like, "I'm going to steal this truck," and then he just jumps in and does it.
Was that kid in the book the car stealer?
Yes. He is in the book, but they don't like plan or anything. Which to me, it felt like in the movie, it's implied that like maybe they like.
Maybe they
talked a little bit about it. Whereas
in
the book, he just hops in, and then the kid who steals trucks just does the same thing, yells, "Get it, put it in gear or whatever," and drive away. But
and then he immediately drives it into a hole.
So yeah, it's pretty similar. But the whole ending of this movie is like identical. He finds Zero under the boat. They drink the sploosh. They climb the mountain. Zero slices his hands on the shovel. Zero gets sick from the sploosh and throws up and almost dies.
They eat a bunch of onions.
Again, it's like identical, pretty much. And then the final line, not the final line, but the final final point in the movie nailed it is that, and I think it's a great line and it feels very much like a movie line in the book, but it's in the book, is that Stanley decides, hey, I'm feeling lucky. We should go dig one more hole.
Yeah.
Do you want to dig one more hole? And Zero's like, yeah. And again, it's one of those moments that it's a very like dramatic end. It's like at the end of a chapter in the book where it's like Stanley's like, do you want to dig one more hole? Boom, next chapter, and they're like going on.
Do it.
Yeah. All right, that was it for the movie Nailed It. We have a few odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
When I started up the movie and like the opening credits were rolling, I was like, my first thought was like, oh, it's a good thing I don't have tryptophobia.
Oh, with the shots,
the shot down from the sky with all the holes.
What is that? Fear of holes?
No, actually, it is. That is what it is. But specifically, so if anybody doesn't know what tryptophobia is, there's a whole subreddit for it on Reddit. Yeah. But if you look
don't Google it. It's
disgusting.
Oh, right. I know what you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. So generally, it's usually like in relation to like skin and that sort of thing, where it's
clusters of holes.
And it's even worse. Usually, it freaks people out more when it's like on skin or that sort of thing. But there's a couple shots in the movie that even just in the ground, it's like kind of off-putting. But yeah, you wanted to suss out why Pendansky hates Zero so much.
Well, I know this is a big part of like his reveal as like a secret asshole.
Yeah.
Is the fact that he's fairly nice to the other boys for the most part.
But he's just a giant asshole.
But he's always a giant asshole to Zero. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. It is interesting, and I think the goal with that moment or with that decision is to make us kind of see from the beginning that maybe he's not quite
like what he seems to be.
Yeah. By having him be this slight jerk to Zero from the start.
Yeah, for no apparent reason.
And then just get meaner and meaner, and then even become meaner and meaner to everybody over the course of the book. I think it's just I think that's the main thing. I also think he's just such a giant asshole that because in the movie we find out that he's not actually a doctor. Right. And now that's not in the book, but let's say that that's the case. Let's say that's part of the story. I think his picking specifically on somebody he susses out as stupid is a very much a projection type of thing. Whereas assuming we're going with that he's not actually a doctor, but he calls himself a doctor and they call him a doctor, him picking on a kid saying you're stupid when he knows that he's operating under this false identity as a smart person, quote unquote, feels very poignant. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree.
April, what is this note with starts with reverse racial profiling? I'm not sure I know what this note is.
Well, I mean, the movie starts off and Shia LaBeouf catches these shoes from seemingly heaven. They drop from the skies.
Yes.
And then a cop is like, pulls over, a black cop, and he's like, hey kid, where'd you get those shoes? How could you afford a pair of shoes like that? So I was like, what? And then you find out later they're like famous missing shoes. Those shoes were they had an APB out on those shoes. So
they did have an APB.
But I was just like, oh, that's kind of you don't usually see that, like, you know. I mean, I'm taking a very 2019 attitude toward it, but
no, for sure. And that's No, that's totally fair, because I have a whole section about that I want to get to here in a second. Is that this and this book, even more so than this movie, is incredibly, and especially reading it this time, is incredibly progressive. Did you feel this, Katie?
Yes.
It has so much to say about society that I did not remotely get as a 10-year-old. It feels even more poignant today than it did 15 years ago or whatever. But so like here's just kind of go through some of the things that this book presents, and again that are in the movie but not always as sort of similar to Harry Potter, where the themes aren't quite as
the themes
pushed to the forefront.
The themes are not at the forefront of the storytelling. But
so our main villain in the flashbacks in this story are Trout Walker, who's this rich, entitled white asshole who's being mean to an interracial couple and and is like. And constantly
shitty to women,
shitty to the black guy in town. And he's from old money. He didn't work for his money, all that sort of stuff. And he's just super entitled, super thinks he should get whatever he wants. And that line does make it into the movie where he says, nobody says no to me. And she says, well, I just did.
Yeah.
You know, and that's straight out of the book. All of the bad guys in this book and this movie are old abusive white people.
Yes, every single one.
Literally every single one. And all of the heroes are immigrants. They're people of color. They're economically disadvantaged people. So Stanley himself is not an immigrant, but his family is immigrants from Latvia. Zero, a person of color. A lot of the campers, X-Ray, Armpit, Magnet, are all people of color, and then even the like Zigzag, who isn't, he's just seeming, we don't know a lot about his backstory, but he's seemingly a white guy. It's implied in the book more so than in the movie that he has some sort of he's like paranoid and maybe schizophrenic potentially.
Well, it's a big fat commentary on who gets sent to prison.
Yes, it is a big fat commentary on the type of people who ends up in prison.
Yeah,
it's people of color. It's economically disenfranchised people, and it's people who suffer from mental illnesses, that sort of thing. Generally, you know, and again, it is a big commentary on that sort of thing, and so those are all of our heroes in this. And then I think one of the other things I thought was really interesting that I did not notice the first time is that, so one of the big storylines is Zero runs into the desert and nobody goes after him. They don't care. They're just going to let him die in the desert. And they're like, nobody will find him. Nobody will care about him. Nobody cares about Hector Zeroni. And Stanley eventually decides, I'm going to go after him. He's like, I got to go find him. I got to chase after him. And Stanley doesn't even realize he's doing this. But in this moment, he's actually using his privilege of having a family, of having people who care about him, to help other people, to use that privilege to bring up other people, because him going into the desert to find Zero, he thinks he might just go find him. Maybe he'll save him. But even if he doesn't actively save him himself, Stanley has people that will come look for him.
Yeah.
Stanley has people, because his family is not well-to-do. They're lower, financially lower class, that sort of thing. But he has, they have some money, that sort of thing. They're not homeless. Their family has a lawyer. They're going to come try to find him. Whereas Zero doesn't have that. And I think that's a really interesting commentary.
Yeah.
And then also, just so much of this. Like, I love, too, that Stanley, over the course of the book, realizes that Zero doesn't like asking questions, because his whole life as a ward of the state, he just gets asked questions by all of these people who don't care about him, but ask him all these questions because it's part of, what they have to do. And so this is sort of this thing for for Zero that he doesn't like. Doesn't like answering questions. So Stanley doesn't ask him questions. He listens to him. He lets him talk when he wants to talk, and he lets him offer him information. And I think it's a really good commentary on Stanley being like sort of sensitive to like what Zero's trauma is and like where he's come from. And instead of just like inserting himself into Zero's life and trying to fix things, he just listens. Yeah. Which is like a really cool message. In the book, again, not all of this is super obvious in the movie, I don't think, or as obvious. And then obviously the Kate and Sam storyline, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Right.
It's bigotry and that sort of thing. Yeah, but there's lots of details like that in this book that I think are really, really good and really, really like just stuck out to me so overtly this read through that I did not get the first go around as a kid. So I don't know.
It's cool shit.
It's cool shit.
It's not what I thought I was getting when I watched this movie. Like I thought it was just a Shia LaBeouf, adventure comedy. I didn't think it'd have such big themes, which is pretty cool. Yeah, it is really cool. And the movie, again, the movie is not quite as successful, but it definitely has them for sure. Like you still get them. They're still there. They're just not quite as, they don't hit home quite as hard as they do in the book, but they're definitely still there. And it's definitely, if you watch the trailer, not what you're expecting going into the movie. You enjoyed the CGI lizards? Well, yes. Well, I like bad CGI now and then. I thought it was. I laughed whenever I saw them, so I'm gonna throw that out there.
We also laughed. Yeah, we also laughed. They are fun in that regard. So the lawyers from Disclosure. What's Disclosure?
Disclosure. It's a movie we did on the podcast a few months ago. It's about Michael Douglas getting sexually harassed by Demi Moore. And that woman plays a lawyer in that too. So it's like the same character, kind of. I was like, hey.
I'm going to have to look up if she's ever been in Law and Order now.
Yeah,
I feel like
everybody who does bit roles has been in Law and Order.
Yeah. I think
I'm going to be disappointed if she wasn't
almost
a lawyer,
100% sure she was in Law and Order.
I recognize her from something specific, and it's driving me crazy that I can't figure out.
Probably Law and Order.
I didn't watch a lot of Law and Order, but it's something.
She's been in
that.
like a ton of stuff in like small roles.
I felt like, overall I thought this movie was pretty good, but I did think that the filmmaking style, and I don't know if you felt this way, April or Katie, was kind of felt very much dated to 2003.
Yes, definitely.
Like the things that stuck out to me, like we talked about the montages earlier, but not, like montage you can use in a way that's like a little more timeless. The way they use it in this movie is it's a montage and then we're putting like a contemporary pop song with lyrics over it.
Yeah.
Like
they played Shaggy at one point. Do you guys remember Shaggy?
Yeah, I remember Shaggy. Who doesn't? Please.
I didn't know what song it was, Shaggy? But the voice was it was very recognizable.
Yes. Yeah. It's just like if you're gonna do a montage, don't put lyrics unless it's Eye of the Tiger. Don't put lyrics to the montage. Also, they did a lot of slow mo, like at random times. Like just insert shots of slow-mo, but it's not because of, I guess, the time period when it was shot. It's like low frame rate slow-mo to where it's like they're shooting this at 24 frames or 23.97 or whatever they shot it at, and then they slowed it to like 50%, so you get the stuttery 12 frame per second slow-mo or whatever, which doesn't look great, especially not nowadays when we want to shoot slow-mo, we shoot it at a higher frame rate, so when we slow it down it looks good. But it all felt, a lot of that all felt very dated to me. Didn't look great.
Yeah.
The cinematographer is a guy who's worked on a lot of TV shows. He did a bunch of episodes of Lost and something else. But this was like his first thing that he did, was this movie. And then after that, he went on and did like TV shows and stuff. But I just thought it was a little dated. But other than that, pretty good. Any other notes anybody want to talk about before we get to the final verdict? Anything specific we want to mention?
The whole like pig stealing plot line was a little weird because it's almost supposed to be like this romantic story about how this guy wants to marry this girl, but her father wants him to pay him because he's like, this other suitor gave me a pig, and he's like, well, I love her, and he's like, I think I'd rather have the pig. So that's why he ends up going to the old lady, and she's like, bring this pig up the mountain and it'll get big. So he brings her the pig, he brings the father the pig. And then he's like, now I can marry you. And she's like, well, I think I'm going to compare the pigs. So she does. And then she's like, I'm not sure. And he's like, what? You don't instantly want to marry me? Fuck you. And then just leaves. And it's like, dude, it's like he just expected her to drop and fall in love with him and be like, okay, I want to marry you. And also the other suitor was the guy from Borat.
He is the guy from Borat. I totally realized that, which I did not. Obviously, when I saw this the first time in 2003, I guess Borat came out around that time, but I did not realize that was Borat or the guy from Borat. But yeah, holy cow! I was like, that's the dude from Borat.
I guess.
Which, Katie, have you ever seen Borat?
I actually haven't.
Oh yeah, the scene he's in is
managed to miss
one hell of a scene, or at least one of the scenes he's in is something else. But yeah, that was mind blowing to me this go around. I think that might be this particular note might be a bit of a more of an issue in the movie. I think the implication in the book is that that Elia, who is the guy with the pig, and this girl have been sort of courting for a while. At least that's how I felt it. Their relationship was that, or do you not get that?
I didn't get the idea that they were actually courting, but he had been in love with her for a while.
Yeah, but then,
well, that's interesting.
Why does he just leave? Because does she reject him? Is that what happens in the book?
Yeah. So the exact same thing happens in the movie as does in the book, where she doesn't immediately pick him. So he's like, well, then screw this, insulted. Because obviously. Yeah, he's insulted. I guess, and now I really see what you're saying. I think that is an interesting read of it, of him sort of being this entitled, well, obviously you should pick me because I look how handsome I am, type of thing. I always read it more so that and I think this is what the book's going for, but I do like your read on this actually.
I like this read on it. I think I think what we're supposed to get from the book is that he's disappointed that she's kind of comparing them equally.
Yeah.
Him and the other suitor. Because
it's supposed to be very clear in the book that this other guy is completely only interested in her. But I like this modern reading. In the book, it's supposed to be that that this other guy is only interested in her because she's the young, pretty girl in town, and he doesn't love her. He doesn't care at all about her. He's like, I want the youngest, prettiest bride in town. Here's my pig. I'm the rich old guy who gets to marry whoever I want. And whereas we're supposed to identify, at least we're supposed to identify with Elia, who is described in the book as actually being in love with her. He thinks she's beautiful, and he really seemingly again. But we don't get, now that I'm thinking about it, we don't get a lot of details about any sort of relationship or anything, to the point where it is honestly to her. What's the difference other than purely right.
Other than purely Elia is not disgusted,
but he could just be a crazy stalker to her,
right? Exactly. But that's the point. That's actually like, other than the fact that Elia's handsome and this other dude's not, that's actually puts almost more agency onto her, that she doesn't just immediately pick the handsome guy that she doesn't know over the non-handsome guy that she doesn't know. Because to her, like, the non-handsome guy could be nicer than this other guy.
Yeah,
from what we know. You know what I mean? Like, the handsome guy could be fucking abusive and awful. And now I think the implication, again, in the book is that it's the fat ugly guy with the money is actually sort of also probably an asshole and that sort of thing, like, is what we're supposed to get. But we don't get enough details to actually get that reading out of it. So I like this. I like this reading. And I like that this is all sort of started off because Elia is an entitled asshole. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, he doesn't carry Madame Zeroni up a mountain.
Yeah, what a jerk.
So, what a jerk.
And
I like
then
that
his
a lot.
family is cursed for all eternity.
Cursed for all eternity. We didn't mention it earlier. I'm realizing now we didn't talk about the reveal that Mr. Sir is actually a woman.
Well, I don't even know if that was the joke.
It is. No, it is. It absolutely is.
Which is,
yeah. So he says, because at first the joke is just...
it's not a man's name.
It's not a man. Marion. That's not... I didn't think that was a man's name. And they all laugh at him. And now maybe this isn't the joke, but it sure felt like it to me. John Voight goes... It isn't, like, in a way of, like, I'm not
I thought
a man
he was
type
just
of
saying,
thing.
I have a girl's name. But I guess you could read it
possible.
that way.
You could read it either way.
I think you could read it either way. To me, I was like, that feels like maybe they're going for a different read on that than... Yeah, which was, like I said, really disappointing. But if that was the read they were going... Either way, it's still stupid.
And
like,
not
it's still,
in the book, right?
Gross.
No, not at all. None of that is in the book.
Think so.
Not even a little bit. No, not at all. Not at all. All right, let's get on to the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
Before we do that, we have a couple things that we could ask you to do for us. One, if you could do us a big favor, if you enjoyed this episode, go find This Film Is Lit on iTunes or wherever you listen to our podcast, mainly iTunes. Do it on iTunes. Give us a rating and a review. That's the only thing that matters. Let's be real. Give us a rating and a review. That helps out our podcast a lot. It would be super awesome if you could do that. Also, you can find us on all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, all that sort of good stuff. But also, April, your podcast. Where can people find you?
We're on iTunes. We're also on SoundCloud. I guess iTunes is Apple Podcast, Google Play, and Spotify. So all like the major places. And we have a Twitter account, which is at No Such Thing Pod. Or if you want to email the podcast, we're No Such Thing as a Bad Movie at gmail.com.
Cool. And one more time, that was No Such Thing as a Bad Movie podcast. If you like bad movies, if you like talking about bad movies, but with a very positive spin, that's one of the things I love about it. It's because what we try to do on Good, Bad, or Bad, Bad, if you like our show, if you haven't listened to No Such Thing as a Bad Movie, is it's not a tearing down. It's not a mean thing. It's a
love letter.
It's a love letter to bad movies. And I really do enjoy the positivity of it. And I think it's because, you know, there's lots of bad movie channels out there that are about tearing people down and being assholes. And we try not to do that on Good, Bad, or Bad, Bad. And I really like that you guys do the same thing on No Such Thing as a Bad Movie. And so I highly recommend it. Go check them out. They're fantastic.
Thank you. And I can give a little preview to the next episode, which we're recording tomorrow. We're going to be doing one of the Resident Evils, I think the second one, Resident Evil Apocalypse, and Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, which I've never seen.
I've never seen either of those.
I'm seeing it tomorrow. That's like Dead Alive is like a classic, not even a bad movie.
Are you just? We've had a lot of people recommend Peter Jackson movies for Good, Bad, or Bad, Bad, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure none of these are actually bad movies, but you know, whatever. They could.
What about The Hobbit?
Well, that's
except for The Hobbit, yeah. Are you just starting randomly on the second Resident Evil movie, or did you do the first one?
No, I haven't seen the first one
because I didn't remember. I was like, did I miss? Because I didn't remember seeing you guys do the first one.
Justin just said the second one was the funniest. So also it was shot all in Toronto, so we could see all these locations that we knew. So that was that was fun.
Awesome. So time for the final verdict. I have to give this one just barely to the book. The movie does an incredible job of capturing so many details and great moments from the book. The plot is essentially identical with only minor tweaks, but the way the multiple storylines are woven together just doesn't quite work as well, I think, as evidenced by what we've discussed with April over the course of this episode, as it does in the book. The pace and timing at which the book doles out little clues and little pieces of information is just so perfect, and it all leads up to the moment in the end where everything just clunks into place so perfectly that I'm not sure the movie really ever had any chance of matching it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. While the book and the movie are pretty dang close, I agree that the book's strength and slight superiority lies in how the moving parts are revealed to fit together. And it's unfortunate, but I think the movie may have always been doomed to do this a little clunkily.
Yeah. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I read this book, especially in our current political landscape, as a fiercely progressive and empowering story, although not perfect, that speaks truth to power, and it's so incredibly disappointing that the movie includes an offhand transphobic punchline in like the waning moments of the movie. It's a giant hole in the moral fabric of this film, and a reminder that even while a piece of media can exceed on so many levels, it humanizes neurally atypical people, it criticizes absurd amounts of inherited wealth, it condemns racism and bigotry, it shows those of us who are privileged how to be better allies, that it can still fall short. And I think that should be a powerful reminder to all of us that we can always do better.
2 thumbs up.
Well said.
So there you go.
I also I wanted to say I didn't read this book, but I read 3 other Louis Zacher books growing up, which is the Wayside School series.
I love those. Yes.
Yeah, and
so
those
good.
are the only ones of his that I had read. But like I think Katie was saying in the prequel, those were read to me and in school.
Oh, yeah.
I think I was in grade 3, and I thought they were just hilarious. And I love them so much that I bought them, and I still have them on my shelf today. And that's why I was a little bit like shocked by all the violence and racism in this book.
The Wayside books are definitely more on the silly side.
They're for younger children for sure.
Yeah.
But I would totally recommend that series because like for kids or adults, because I thought it was great. I think they made it into a cartoon, but I never saw it.
They did. I looked this up. They did because I was looking at like to see if Louis Zacher had written any other movies or anything, and he has a writing credit on that show. It's like a TV movie.
Oh, okay.
Like a animated TV movie. He has a writing credit on that. I have not seen it, so I don't know if it's any good, but I also loved the Wayside Story books as a kid. I read all of them and thought they were hilarious. This one's heavier material, but also I think a little more poignant at times.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad that this seems to be one that's read in school a lot.
Yeah.
Because I don't like the term required reading.
Yeah.
But this is a book that I think should be required reading.
It's close to, as much as that word should apply to anything, this is probably up there. I would agree because, again, I think it has really great moral messages as well as just being an incredibly satisfying and really interesting read.
Yeah.
To like really get you thinking about what literature can be as a child in terms of different storylines and all. Yeah, it's really, really fascinating. So, Katie, what's next?
Up next, we are kicking off spooky season.
Spooky season.
And we are going to do Interview with the Vampire.
Ooh. I've never seen this movie.
It's a great movie.
Is it a good movie?
I think so.
I've never seen it. I've never read it. I know a couple of vague things about it, and I'm very excited.
Is this the one? Hold on. This is going to reveal my... is this got Brad Pitt in it?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been watching that
Just
movie
making sure.
since I was like 10 or younger. Watched that movie very young because, little girls are always into vampires. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, of course.
I mean.
They're pretty great. Yeah, I hadn't seen it, though. I'm excited to watch it because I've always heard good things, I feel like, about the movie. So I honestly wanted another one of these that I had no idea was based on a book. So, which happens like every week, but whatever. Oh, all right. That is going to do it for this week. We want to give you one more quick reminder. If you could do us a favor, if you want, go find us a clip for each of our segments. Go listen to the segment. You just listen to this episode. Find the clips that make sense from movies that you love. Bonus points if they're from adaptations. They don't have to be, but if they're from all of the ones currently are.
Yes, they are.
I think.
I made sure of that.
Yeah. So if they're from adaptations, even better. Like I said, bonus points, but they don't have to be necessarily, but that would be better. So go and do that for us. We would really, really appreciate it. Send it to our Gmail or Facebook, Twitter, whatever you want. Also, one more time, go check out No Such Thing as a Bad Movie Pod with April, Etmanski, Colin, and Justin.
Yes.
And, as always, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else,
keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.
There I am! April's in on it. Nice. Well done.